Good day, strategy gamers, and welcome back to another unboxing video. And today we're going to be unboxing Traces of War. This is a World War II East Front game that's designed by Tetsuya Nakamura, and it's published by VUCA Simulations. This is my first title that I've actually purchased from VUCA. I gotta say the experience was pretty pleasant. Package arrived very quickly, well done, and overall very excited for this. It's actually not my first game by Tetsuya Nakamura. His games have actually been published by some others, including MMP, and with MMP they had called them, I think it was the Red Box series, and some of those titles include A Victory Awaits, A Victory Denied, etc. This is part of the same or very similar system. Of course, it has some of its own unique mechanics, but it kind of belongs in the same family of games, probably. Cover art, very well done. Like the art style, the secondary comment, all the VUCA simulation games, I think, generally receive positive praise for the art and aesthetics of the games, something that we'll probably be commenting on as we get into the contents of the box itself. But cover, very impressionable, very positive. It is a pretty standard box size, nothing too large, maybe call it 2 inches. On the back, we get a nice little example capture of the game. You can see the art style of the counters there. Nice contents. We've got 2 maps. The maps themselves are just a little bit smaller than a standard map. So it will fit on most gaming surfaces if you can normally get 2 game maps on one surface. It's got about 300 some odd counters, so it's not too counter dense either for an East Front game. Generally, I think most of Nakamura's games are a little less counter dense at a little bit of a higher scale. We then get some player aid sheets, a solitaire track sheet, rulebook, some dice, and we'll go through each of those as we open it all up. It is at the division scale for the Axis and the core scale for the Soviets. Each turn is about a month. The game itself, looking at the historical period here, actually takes place after the German counteroffensive around Kursk. And what the game focuses on is the Soviet counterattack into Ukraine in 1943 into March of 1944. So really kind of that winter between those 2 years, and the Soviets race to try to, cross some key rivers, capture some key objectives in Ukraine, and really advance the southern front in the east. Really not much else to say here on the back, so let's go ahead and open up the box itself. Shrink came off very nicely. It's always a positive. And we'll probably start with the maps and have those lay out as the backdrop. So we got our rule book, 2 of the maps. Now I've heard this from others who've had the game, and immediately the texture feels very unique on the maps. I think we'll talk about that a little later. This looks like probably a turn track or reinforcements. Yeah. Oh, it's a solitaire track sheet, actually. Oh, very nice. Okay. Our 2 dice, which we will set aside. Always appreciate them including them, but once you've got some nice dice, you generally stick with some of your own. Now the counters. This selfishly might be the thing I'm most excited about with this game from VUCA Simulations, is they're known usually for having counters that come pre-rounded. You can find this with other publishers too. Certainly some of the GMT titles will have rounded counters. For example, I think Triumph and Tragedy comes to mind, Churchill, some of those series by Mark Herman. Overall, they're of a good standard weight, but I'm just noticing it might be just a couple of little blemishes there on the print. You can see like right here at the top, a little white mark. It's almost like it's peeling off a little there. And also, this might just be the aesthetics or my eyesight, but it feels like some of them might just be a little crooked sitting in there, but if it's all rounded out to the same dimensions, maybe that doesn't matter. Each counter, of course, has its own backside as well with information. So that's the first counter sheet. The second, so I think these are mostly the Axis forces. And then we have a mixture of Axis, Soviet forces, and then a whole bunch of markers, out of supply, control, etc. The player aid sheets, again, we'll come back to some of these. Let's see what we got here. More player aid sheets. So there's a player aid sheet B and A that we'll take a look at, and that gets us to the bottom of the box. So let's get out one of these maps to see what it looks like. And we will orient it here. So, I mean, again, like I commented, the texture, it's almost like a linen finish. It's almost what you would expect maybe on, back in the day when you would do really fancy resume letter prints and stuff. It reminds me something similar of that. And it is lighter, something else that I've heard others comment on. The cardstock that is printed on certainly is lighter. So I'm curious just kind of how that holds up then with multiple folds, creases, into the box, out of the box, into the box, etc. It'll be curious just to kind of see how that holds up. But certainly I'm not making these comments because the feeling is that it's of a low quality. It is just a different texture that I don't have any experience with anything in my current collection. Looking at some of the map details, I really like, and you can see it here in the blue and the orange text coloring. This is actually identifying the starting locations for different units. So for setup, the game's received some praise for how easy it is to set up with some of these aids, and I'm a little torn on it, I guess, actually, because part of me feels like that kind of distracts from the actual game maps, aesthetics, immersion, whatever you may want to call it. Because then once you move past those starting locations, you've then forever got this map where there's just these call outs for where the units started. On the flip side, if it means you get to the table faster, you get to play it more time spent playing instead of setting up, I suppose it's hard to critique that too much. The map itself as well, it's got an interesting kind of cartography style. Like you can see elevation and terrain. A lot of times hex and counter war games, if a hex has a hill in it, hilly terrain, the same symbol or hex visual will appear for just everyone that has that same terrain or very consistently similar. Here, it actually almost looks as if it's its own satellite or its own topography map where each hex appears very unique and feels well put together. So visually, that's very appealing. We see, of course, rail lines and roads. They stand out nicely. We have city markers here. And this was one that I was kind of interested in. It's going to be a little hard to tell in the video right now the way we're oriented. You can see the city names, and they're printed in, say, English, I guess would be the English translation for the city names, Stelino, etc. But on the flip side, if we were looking at it with the map upside down, you can actually see the Cyrillic translations for the cities. I'm really fascinated by that. I think that's kind of a cool touch. And I'm really looking forward then to practicing just a little bit of my Russian, Ukrainian, what have you, on how they've translated these. But overall, I think it's just kind of cool to see that on the map. I've seen it in some other games, but it's certainly not common. It takes up space as well. I think we also have, reinforcement schedules here that are on the map. So And then down here we have a turn track as well, a victory point track. Actually, let me move it up just a little so you can see that. Yeah, so you see you have a turn track here, victory points. So overall, a lot of information that is on the map itself. I'm going to set this one aside. We'll just take a look at the other to see if there are any distinct differences. I'm assuming it'll be rather similar, but let's take a look. Yeah, so here you see the reinforcement pool for panzers and then for infantry. And then it just looks like you have a little spot to put the active chit, Luftwaffe box. So yeah, overall map is really well done. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. We already talked a little bit about the counters, but let's talk about now some of the player aids that come with the game. So there are a total of, these 4 sheets. These are heavy. This might be the heaviest, hardest cardstock that I've ever seen any player aid ever on. This is, it stands out like a sore thumb. You're not going to bend this. Don't sit here holding this in your hand, bending it, because it might snap. It's so firm. So player aid sheet A and player aid sheet B, there's back sides to each. So let's just look then at one set of them, but each player gets their own set then. Player aid sheet A walks us through the sequence of play. Just even how they visually have done the sequence of play is really nice, where it looks like you may actually go back to the action phase here. There's a special rule that's called out talking about the chit selection, how to fill the chit cup, the chits themselves. So really it seems like player aid sheet A walks you through a turn and the different events, because you can see we go from sequence of play 1 through 4, and here we have descriptions for each of those phases. On the back side, we have our tables, it looks like. So combat resolution table, and this is pretty standard, I think, with the series of games. It's I don't want to say limited, but it's a smaller combat resolution table. You, of course, round to your ratio, and then you have a pretty simplistic translation of results based off of a single die roll, it looks like. So it doesn't get too complicated. It's not too vast. Negotiation points. So I think these come into play with negotiating to have, stronghold cities, having their status reconsidered, air power, etc. A little bit of a translation of the negotiation point costs. So for example, it takes 3 negotiation points to cancel a supreme command order. The Stavka Chit appearance, so it looks like the Stavka Chit doesn't start showing up maybe until turn 6, if I'm interpreting that right. Nice little reminder about how to round fractions, zone of control explanation, and then terrain effects chart. So you can see that, we were talking about that topography, elevation, etc. It still does try to translate all that here onto the terrain effects. Pretty simple, standard movement point cost, and then the combat effect. All right, so that's player sheet A. Player aid sheet A. That's, for some reason, a tongue twister for me. Player aid sheet B looks at different, these almost look like excerpts from a rule book. So like section 8, I'm assuming in the rule book is around supply, so it probably is taking the key snippets of information from the rules and putting them on to player aid sheet B. When we actually open up the rule book, we'll take a look to see, this is how big supply is on the aid sheet, how big is it in the rule book. And then on the back side, we continue on with that. Nice little chart about unit sizes, HQ types, etc. And all in full color. I mean, obviously you're seeing that, but just there's nothing that I've seen yet that visually is disappointing. I will say, though, maybe there's clearly a kind of subtle tone of aesthetic with the colors used, the palette of colors used with this game. I guess I could see maybe some complaints of you stare at it for a really long time. Sometimes it's nice having high contrast, bright colors to really be able to distinguish. And here, Like let's use this as an example. If you can see on the map this reinforcement schedule here for the Soviets, the shade of these three is ever so slightly from the shade of these two. I don't know if there's really an importance to that. Maybe it's the organization structure, the core structure of what those units are part of. But without them sitting, these two side by side, it is going to be really tough to tell that there is any difference there. Whereas brighter colors, or just using a wider color palette, that might be a little easier to distinguish. Myself, though, I find it great. It's a balance in our hobby where you want it to be so much of a grognard simulation. Every can of soup being cooked, how long does it take? How much water does it need? But equally, you want to sit down at the table and enjoy the experience too. This, I was a little surprised by this solitaire track sheet. Now, I'm certainly going to be playing this game solitaire and opposed, so anytime there are aids for a solitaire experience, I'm always going to be ecstatic about that. I don't know enough about the game mechanics to be able to translate everything here to how it relates back to a solitaire experience. And this is single-sided. Might be the only thing I've seen so far that is single-sided other than the maps. Last up, we've got the rule book. So we get the cover from the game on the rule book cover. This is, probably a 32-pound gloss print. Nice table of contents. Don't usually see that much white space on the first page of a rule book in our hobby, but there is quite a bit. Just talking about the publisher there. Game components is what we begin with. Pretty long section on game components, actually, but I suppose that makes sense with the different command chits, supply chit, etc. There's probably a bit to wrap your head around before you start to understand the mechanics of the chit system. Again, I'm a little surprised by this. Look at all this white space here, right? Normally in these rule books, you're trying to cram as much information onto each page as you possibly can, but they clearly made a design decision of, no, talk preparation for play, then move on to the next page. Don't confuse the reader with more content here their eyes are going to jump to. Pros and cons to that, of course, right? Sequence of play going through. So I would say in terms of content, if we go back to the player aid sheet A, so this one page talked about your sequence of play, right? And it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. In the rule book, sequence of play is about 1 page and 2/3. So really, it's almost as if, like, if they took out these visuals, they're getting probably pretty close to an 8.5 by 11 page. So hopefully that's a sign that sequence of play is so straightforward and easy enough to follow that makes sense. But it certainly is easier to have it on the player aid instead of flipping to, page 6 of the rule book as you're going through. Yeah, okay, let's take another reference here. So, we had commented on supply, section 8 of the rules taking up this much space. In the rule book, it takes maybe twice that much space, but the big difference is they have a full example. And what I'm noticing is that for almost every section, it seems there is a full color example of supply, a full color example of normal movement, full color example of 9.3, zone of control effects on movement. So those visual aids are always very useful. Combat, this is by far the most text-dense section of the rulebook or anything we've seen so far. Now, you look at that on player aid sheet B, 2/3 of this player aid sheet is combat. So it does seem to be quite summarized on the aid sheet. Then we get into reinforcements and special rules. There are also some optional rules. I like every game that comes with optional rules. I feel like when you're going through a design of a game, playtesters, whoever it may be, are probably always recommending, hey, you could tweak it and have a different experience with this one little mechanic or something like that. And I'm just glad when those get passed along to the player in the rule book. But again, more white space, and this is not the last page of the rule book. But yeah, so the last 2 pages here are historical notes and a little excerpt about Manstein. Interesting. And we see a visual too of the December 43 offensive, July to December, excuse me, and then December to April. So just kind of a snapshot in time of the two. Now let's actually go back. If memory serves, there are actually 2 scenarios in this game. So there's Race to the Dnipro, and then there's the Traces of War campaign. Yeah, so 2 scenarios. So I would bet that those 2 scenarios match up to the 2 visuals here, so you can kind of have a nice little comparison of where did you end up compared to the historical outcome. I think that's pretty nice, being able to have that gut check as you kind of go through of, am I making historical progress or not playing the game? And it's a good benchmark for most players. That brings us to the end of all the contents. Well, the dice, there's nothing particularly exciting. They're not bad dice, just nothing special. That brings us to the end, though, now of all the contents that came in the box. I'm excited to get this to the table. I want to give this a try, but then I also need to get out A Victory Awaits. I think I'll probably play both back to back to stay familiar with the system. The system itself, I've heard, is maybe just one step further than something like a standard combat series from MMP. So maybe sitting between an SCS and BCS or OCS, kind of in between those for some type of comparison of complexity. But maybe what I'm most excited about is just it being a chit pull system and the really kind of benefit the chit pull systems have for solitaire play. Adds randomness. You're not able to just predict what's going to happen tomorrow quite as well. So really, really excited for the game and getting it to the table. If you have any questions about the game, please let me know. We'll be following this up with a first impressions video once I've had a chance to actually play it a little bit. And I don't know if we'll do a Let's Play series of the game, but it's certainly a candidate for one. So let me know what you think. And as always, strategy gamers, hoping you have yourselves an excellent day. Bye now.